Hola, I'm Herson Borrero, editor-at-large at City and State, and today we have a figure, a New York political figure, a leader, labor leader, and just a New York City kind of guy. Norman Seabrook is known for his no-nonsense approach to speaking with everyone, including politicians. Norman, you seem to have yourself in the center of things. You have now a judge saying that, deciding on all kinds of things, but we've had conversations about your responsibility to the people that you represent. Prison guards. What's the status, and tell me about why you want to keep some of the things that they do from being public or having access, protecting them. Can you sort of explain what's the latest bout that you have, and why do security guards, especially those that...
Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the work that you do. Correctional officers play a very, very, very pivotal role in law enforcement in the city of New York. We deal with some of the most violent individuals in the city. New York jail system, Rikers Island, has become the new dumping ground. We have the mentally ill, we have the homeless, we have the guilty, we have the innocent, and we have the gangs that run the facilities. If you have gang members from the Bloods and the Crips and the M17s and the Latin Kings and all of these different organizations, and you make the correctional officers' information available to them whenever they request it or whenever something takes place, you then put their family's life in danger. Because you know, and I know, as growing up in the city of New York, how people try to intimidate other people. And I would venture to say that a lot of correctional officers can be intimidated by the gangs that roam the corridors of the city's jail system. So my approach is to ensure that they're safe. How do I do that? There's two ways of me doing it. One is to make sure that, in hopes that a judge would secure their information the same way that they secure a police officer's information. Now, a police officer arrests someone, they're with the police officer 3 or 4 hours, fingerprint them, do the process, drive them to central booking. From then on, they're with the correctional officer until such time a judge says it's time for them to go home or go upstate or whatever the case may be. And we see them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I have to keep their information private. I have to protect their family. And some elected officials or judges or others feel that, you know what, that shouldn't be. Well, if that's not the case, then why don't the judge and all the rest of them publish their home addresses and everything else and their information so that they can then feel the same pressures that a New York City correction officer.
Actually, they are listed publicly, a person elected to office, but I can understand the difference between an elected official and a judge, and a judge maybe not so, but elected officials do. But I understand your point. But in the case of misbehaving, abusive, or even just bullies inside the system that commit a crime against an inmate for beat them up or cause their death, as has been documented, do you think there should be exceptions? I just want to get to the sense, you as a labor leader, Norman Seabrook, is just a general blanket statement, everybody's information, prison guards are protected, or is it you making it, correction officers, sorry, are actually protected no matter what happens? Are you saying that that should be a blanket thing, or are you saying that in the case of where there is an actual evidence of an excesses on the part of an officer or correction officers, do you have an exception for that?
I absolutely, no, and I'm glad you raised that, because every correction officer that comes into the New York City Department of Correction, I speak to them at orientation, and I speak to them at graduation, and I tell them I have zero tolerance for abusing inmates. You are not there to abuse inmates. You are there to maintain care, custody, and control. And if you feel that you are going to physically hurt someone or get correction officers involved in uses of force that they should not be involved in. I have no tolerance for that. Now, you'll get your legal services that everyone's entitled to, but I'm not going to go that extra mile for you, because you kicking the shit out of an inmate simply because you can, I have a problem with that. You see, you know, Gerson, and I'm talking real talk to you. You wouldn't punch somebody in the face that bumped into you on the streets on 42nd Street or in Broadway. You wouldn't just haul up and punch him in the face. So I don't want you punching this inmate in the face because you think you can get away with it. I want correction officers to be professional, to act professional, and do their job professionally. Now, you get some. There is 1% of the correction officers that no matter what I say, no matter what anyone says, they want to go over and beyond. But if you're willing to give up your mortgage, your pension, and everything else that you've worked for your family just because you feel that you have the right to destroy the life of this kid, I wouldn't care what he called me. He could call me names all day long. My job is not to punch him in his face. My job is to take a pen, write down the infraction that he committed, submit it, and let the process take its place. Now, if they put him in punitive segregation, which some people call solitary confinement, that's on them. But I will not allow, nor will I stand by and ever watch an inmate be abused.
So why the blanket call that you're saying correction officers have entitled to their privacy? I'm trying to get a grasp of that, because you have police officers, and I know that you don't, you know, your fellow union leaders like Pat Lynch and the PBA. You know, I've never seen a case where Pat Lynch has said that a police officers, you know, he can see them choking them and he won't say anything, and he protects them. Is there a case in which you have proven that there are correction officers or an officer which say, hey, you know, we'll protect, I know you're a leader and you have to protect them as you're president of the union. Is there an instance where you say this person has gone too much? What does a labor leader do? Do you just do that behind the scenes? Or I mean, they're afforded legal counsel.
No, let me give you an example. Khalees Browder, I think his name was, a young man that was incarcerated in the jail system for a backpack.
Right.
The Bronx DA put him in jail. He stayed 3 years in jail. Then he got out. He committed suicide. They showed a video of the correction officer using force. I publicly said that shit's wrong. There's nothing that you could tell me that this kid deserved what happened to him. And I made a public statement and I said, I apologize to the parents. I said, no child, no mother should have to bury their child, because these are circumstances that led up to this kid's suicide. I'm from the Bronx. I still live in the Bronx. I'm born and raised in the South Bronx. I've lived in East Harlem. These are the same people that I see every day. Just because they're on Rikers Island, that doesn't make them less of what they are. I don't know what they're there for, and I don't care what they're there for. My job is to maintain care, custody, and control of them until such time a judge decides to let them go, or whatever it is that's going to happen. I will never be that person to, just because I put on a uniform or I represent a group of people in law enforcement, to pass judgment and say everybody that's in our custody is wrong. Everybody that's in our custody is guilty. We have individuals with mental health problems. They don't belong on Rikers Island.
So what are they doing on Rikers Island? And you and I have discussed this, where is that at? Well, you and I have had discussions during the years of how politicians pontificate and they say things, and yet they have the main control because of the laws they created. And where is that at? Because you're not easy with politicians. Some of them are afraid of you.
No.
Oh yes, they are, because you take no nonsense. But so where are you, and are they listening to you? What is Mayor de Blasio doing? What is Preet Bharara?
I think that the mayor doesn't have a sense of what Rikers Island is really about. I think that when you and I preface this by saying, when you brought Bill Bratton back to the police department, you brought an expert that was in New York City before, knows New York City politics, knows New York City's crime. When you promoted the fire commissioner from within, fire department, knows the system, knows what's going on. Board of Education, someone in the system, someone's worked in the system. Don't get me wrong, Joe Pont may be an expert in Maine.
The current commissioner.
Right, he may be an expert in Maine, but he's no expert in New York City. So you have different oversight agencies in the city of New York, like the Board of Correction. So you have to be able to navigate and be able to work on all sides to make reform come together. You can't have reform one-sided. You have to have the voice of the men and women that have boots on the ground, which are the correction officers, to ensure that it's going to be done equally and fairly. They don't want to do that. They just want to say, look, this is what we're going to do and this is how you're going to do it. It doesn't work that way. In order for any system to work, it doesn't matter what type of business it is, it has to be a dialogue between every working part of the system to make a successful business work. Department of Corrections is a business. It's a business to a lot of people. The comptroller has said that we spend over $100,000+ a year for one inmate to be housed on Rikers Island. At the end of the day, that's money wasted. I would be hard pressed to say, why don't you train these kids on how to repair computers? Why don't you train these kids on how to get their CDL license? Why don't you train these kids so that when they leave jail, they have something other to do than go back to the same community, back to the same corner, and put the same gun in their hands to come back to the same institution?
The reality is that you are handling, the correction officers that you represent are handling the scum of the earth for some. You know, it's like these guys got convicted, whether rightfully wrong or whatever it is for crimes. And politicians, elected officials, say, okay, we really don't got to, you know, we don't have to deal with these people because they're already there. It's 10,000 strong that they have prisoners, and so whatever happens to them happens to them. They're not going to be voting for me. They're not going to be voting against me. Are politicians part of the main problem? I know that you've recently had a forum, you're consulting with people, but I don't see elected officials really being involved in giving solutions to this other than when they have hearings. Is there any one elected official that is actually working with you, correction officers, to really get this resolved, or Preet Bharara, who comes in from, you know, and imposes all kinds of stuff? Do you think that's the way to go, or do you need more input from? You mentioned the mayor controller. What about the people that?
I think that, for example, I've had conversations with the Assembly Speaker, Carl Hastings. I've had conversations with Marco Crespo. And we're doing a forum at an event coming up soon in Puerto Rico, where
is that the Somos Conference?
Yes, that is exactly it. And I am going to attempt to re-educate the elected officials on just how they need to get involved in this, because you can't just keep voting to pass legislation that you have not even read the legislation and you don't even understand what it entails. You can't just simply kick the can down the road. Sooner or later, you're either going to run out of road or you're going to run out of the can. One is going to happen. But if you come together and try to get all of the elected officials to understand what the real problem is and come up with real solutions to the problem, then and only then can we go forward. And what do I mean by that? You have to say, okay, if an inmate comes into the city's jail system and the psychologist that interviews the inmate from day one says this person doesn't belong here, they belong in an institution for medical reasons, that person should be moved immediately to the institution. But what they don't do is they don't have a place for them. So they warehouse them on Rikers, and they put them in a cell, about 50 of them together in a cell block area. So 50 of them together that all need Thorazine, that all need psychotropic medications, are not getting it because they're warehousing them. And they're not coming to ensure that these people get the treatment that they need. So what you're creating is a time bomb. You're not helping them. You're creating a time bomb. And then you have a correction officer who's never been trained in mental health, do not know how to articulate and or look at an inmate and say, this person needs help. So the correction officer goes about their duties, and then when something happens, you want to blame the correction officer and say you didn't do your job. But what's my job? My job is care, custody, and control, not to administer medications.
Let me ask you, because as you're speaking, I'm getting a visual. You know, there's a racial component to this. Mm-hmm. The majority of the people at Rikers,
are people of color.
Are people of color.
Yes.
So they're people that can be our neighbors, kids, people who grew up. Okay, so let's be clear on this. You just mentioned that you're going to be discussing this with Carl Hasty, who's the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, who happens to be black from our borough, the Bronx. Marco Crepo, who happens to be Puerto Rican, Peruvian, and married to a Dominican. So where are the white legislators on this? Let me be clear.
Jeff Klein is involved in this. Mark Jonai, Assemblyman, is involved in this, because this is a component that affects all of us. And it's my community today, but it's your community tomorrow. It's just a matter of time. So if we come together and say, okay, let's come up with some real solutions and then have them pass legislation that in turn affects what we do, we can make a better system. But the city of New York, mayor, commissioner of the agency, they don't want the input. They know best. That's the problem. You can't know best. I certainly can't tell you about the comptroller's office. I can't tell you about how the Office of Administration works, but if we all sit together and put our little 2 cents in, maybe we can come up with a caveat or come up with a solution to the problem.
Since you've been leading the Correction Officers Union, you've been under how many mayors now that you've worked?
I've had Giuliani, I've
Bloomberg.
had Bloomberg, I've had this guy, de Blasio.
This guy.
Mayor de Blasio.
Okay, I get it, bro. You know, you ain't gonna take that one back. I get it.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Out of Rudy, Miguelito, as I used to dearly call him, and Bill, who's the worst of them? Who's the best that you've been able to deal with? Let me put it that way.
Rudy.
Rudy Giuliani.
Rudy Giuliani.
The Pinochet of City Hall that I used to call. Why? What did he get that Michael Bloomberg didn't get, and certainly Bill de Blasio is not getting?
He didn't allow his managers not to be accountable. His manager was accountable. Michael Jacobson was accountable.
He's commissioner for...
Yeah, he was accountable. If I called Rudy on the phone and said, Rudy, this guy here is not getting it. I remember one day the first deputy commissioner was acting, and he came back after I called Rudy on the phone for a problem that I was having. And the deputy commissioner looked at me and he says, sometimes you eat the bear and sometimes the bear eats you. And I just got my ass chewed out. I said, it is what it is, baby. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to be the commissioner. I'm just trying to get the job done. Let me give you another example of mismanagement in the department.
Right now.
Right now.
Under this mayor.
Under this mayor.
And you hold him accountable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. AMKC, which is the Anna M. Cross Center, which is the largest facility on Rikers Island, we have a $1 billion budget in the Department of Correction. Inmates are allowed to go shopping once a week in the commissary to get their soup, to get their crackers, to get their cookies, to get their little sandwich stuff, whatever it may be. How is it possible that the largest facility on Rikers Island has no merchandise in it? Now, you don't have no merchandise, so now the inmates are up in arms. So you're creating a hostile environment because all they want is their commissary. Now, this is a true story. We walking to make a tour, myself, members of the board, a chief, and a deputy warden in command. The inmates in the mental health area are going ballistic. 2 of my officers are inside. I knock on the door to the other officer, open the door. The chief goes in with me, we go in. The inmate is ballistic, a Latino kid. He's going nuts. Calm down, what's the matter? They don't have no food for us, they don't have no soup for us, they don't have this. I say to the warden, you gotta get them something. Well, we don't have nothing in the commissary. That's not the answer. The answer is pick up the phone, call another institution, get what you could get from them, give these kids what they're supposed to have so that they don't break the jaw of my correction officer before the end of the tour because y'all are not doing your job. There's no accountability anymore. It's just no big deal. But it's the men and women that I represent that are behind the gate with these guys. It's the men and women that I have to represent, that I have to go to the hospital 3 o'clock in the morning because they had their jaw broken by an inmate. There is no accountability, and when you speak to people about it, they shrug their shoulders. There's another problem. The magnetometers. When you go through, it's a scan system, you go through it, no metal in your pocket, et cetera, et cetera. Where they have them set up at the front door, when you come into the facility, doesn't work. Because if they arrested a correction officer for bringing in a hobby tool, but the correction officer was arrested for promoting prison contraband. Because it's a hobby tool, but it could be used as a razor, a cutter, or a sharpener. It could be used for anything. So they arrested him for promoting prison contraband. But the magnetometer, he has to go through that to get to his locker, to put it in his locker.
Gotcha.
So I say, true story, I say to the commissioner, I sent him a letter. Move the magnetometers. You know what his answer is? I didn't put them there. That's not the answer. The answer is, how do you want a more productive agency? So move the mags, because that's like telling me if I go to Kennedy Airport, as soon as I get out the cab, I got to go through the machine. How much sense does that make? So their answer is, I didn't put it there.
So in San Juan, in the Somos conference, you're going to be speaking to legislators. Is it an open session?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
2 hours.
We're going to catch up with you. I'm going to be there. We're going to be taping this, exactly what you're telling them. I'm going to pick up on that. We'll talk in San Juan at the Somos conference and see what you're getting and what comes out of that chapter, because something's got to work out. I mean, it isn't a junket that they go to for
No,
San
this
Juan.
is so, real talk,
right.
Real time.
So we'll talk then. Norman Seabrook, who has his hands full and happens to be having a translation problem with Bill de Blasio, the current mayor of New York City. Norm, thanks for
Thank you,
coming
sir.
by.
I appreciate
City and
you.
State TV, Herson Borrero. We'll catch you in the next one.